In the room with you this morning is Eric Latif and C.T. Muga. We have a guest. We'll introduce the guest shortly after today's proverb.
No barber shaves himself.
No barber shaves himself. Yeah. Nesawa. Simply because they can't see their head.
Well, I think if you know how intricate the process of shaving is, this is one of those things that you'd rather have someone do for you. Yes.
Something sharp.
Yes.
And then your skin.
And then you don't have eyes at the back of
You
your
don't
head.
have you don't want to take a risk.
Not really. Not when you know very well you don't have to.
Yeah. Our next guest is in the studio. He's Dr. Danvas Makori. He is a commissioner with the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, NCIC. We spoke about them 2 weeks ago. They had just launched a new strategic plan, taking talk of what they had done and now saying, going forward, NCIC, we are going to do this and that. We'll discuss that. In addition to discussing what they are currently doing. Now, we know there are some conflicts around the country, inter-community conflicts. But the one that is basically sticking its head out, ugly head out, is the conflict in Marsabit County. We have seen it started in Isiolo and it just brought in Isiolo into Marsabit County. Various communities, is it historical? Is it a fight over pasture? Is it political? What exactly causes this thing? That's what we're going to be discussing. Dr. Makori, karibu sana.
Thank you guys. Awesome to be here.
Thank you.
Yes.
You feel the privilege?
It's awesome. I enjoy your shows. I enjoy Latif and his nuggets of wisdom here and there.
Umesikia City? It is Latif with the nuggets of wisdom.
No, I understand perfectly. I understand perfectly. The man wants to give you a leg up, Eric. Surely. This is a polite man who knows how to
lift
yes,
the afflicted.
Not only that.
The afflicted, downtrodden.
In Kiswahili, najua kuishi na watu.
Najua kuishi na watu.
Yes.
Welcome to the hot seat in the Situation Room. There's how long have you worked as a commissioner in the NCIC?
We started in November 20th, 2019. So it's about a year and a half and change thereabout.
Before we go into the NCIC itself, let's just understand the background. Dr. Makori background, what is it that you have done before you got into this?
I spent a better part of my adult life in the U.S. When there during Moi eras, I think I was a refugee running from all the drama that Moi took us through. And I came back in 2016. Did a lot of business there, study there, of course. My PhD there. I came back, and the reason I came back was very simple. I'd achieved the American dream, as it's called. Lived in the best parts of town. Actually, I lived the same zip code with Joe Biden.
Where?
And one of my business was engaging with, I can't say much, with his family. Anyway, so I reached, and for me, I had an issue with Kenya. Because I'd been in a system of study that actually works. Things actually work. Systems work, processes work. And regardless of who you are, I came as a foreigner and I made it up to the top echelons of business. And I didn't know anybody, I wasn't connected to anybody. You just work hard. And the systems work. So I said, why can't we just do this in Kenya? You understand? Why can't everybody get a shot? And as long as you work hard, you're consistent, with God's grace, una penya. So I decided, you know what? I took my wife for breakfast. You know what? We're going back to Kenya. She was shocked because I'd vowed never, ever, 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 ever in my life to go back to Kenya. I said, if I leave the US, I'll go to Europe or somewhere else. And I said, I can complain about my home country or I can go and fix it. So I wanted to be part of change the conversation that we can fix this country. We can change this country. And I came back, and my entry point, I came to the county government of Nairobi. I started as the director of the service delivery unit. They had serious challenges in terms of just getting services. So they wanted to recruit somebody who's not part of that internal system, but also understands the Kenyan context.
Someone who's not contaminated.
Yes, but
Adequately contaminated.
adequately coordinated. So I was great for that, and then I worked there for a couple of years with the previous administration. Then when the last governor came into power, I was recruited actually to be a CEC. I started as CEC Agriculture, then I went to Finance. Finance because one of my big things in years was business. I built, pretty sizable business over there. And we couldn't get along just because on principle. There's certain things I could not do and I wasn't gonna do. That's the past. But for me, I got a glimpse of how government works in this country, and I said, this is gonna be a tall order. It's gonna be a tall order. But I was determined to be at the right place, at the right time, to be a part of conversation. Guys, we have to. I believe that not so much. I don't say young leaders, but I think the new set of leaders, fresh leaders who are determined to fix this country. It's not easy, believe you me. We engage in highest levels of power and government. But I think if you're set and focused to fix your country, by God's grace and wisdom, I think we'll be able to do it. That's in a nutshell.
So how did you end up in the commission?
That's a long story.
Give us the summarized version.
The summarized version of it.
Yes.
Executive summary.
Executive summary.
Yes.
I think when I left the county, I was in private practice for a while. I was doing consultancy in, say, media to an extent, and even management. One of the biggest companies, I think, in the region. But for me, I knew I still needed to be in a place of where the most place you can make change is there. So when the position came, of course, I did apply, and I made a few calls. You have to lobby, of course, and then you pull up the contacts that you've worked with and know you. It was very competitive. It was at one point it wasn't even gonna happen. The power intrigues is difficult, but for me, I can tell you, it's. Let me put it this way: executive summary. The times, no matter what the challenges, because it was very challenging to get there, almost impossible. If that's a destined way for you,
You will get
will get it.
If it's your destiny,
It
it will happen.
Yes. Of course, there are people who play roles.
Dr. I
Yes.
see you're a man of faith.
Yes. I am.
Because when somebody talks about destiny with such conviction, that is a person who has a very clear focus on infinity.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they've tested.
Yes. And proven.
It tried and tested. Aisifuye mvua.
Amen.
Imemnyea. Yeah. Now let's move over into the work that you've been doing, especially this ongoing conflict in Marsabit. We'll come back and look at the work of the NCIC, the new strategic plan and all. But conflict right now is unfolding in Marsabit. What's happening in Marsabit?
I don't think we could give you context in Marsabit vis-a-vis the country, because Impunity is the whole country. We are always from Kerio Valley to Isiolo to Nandi Kakamega there is no conflict system as complex and as challenging as Marsabit.
Right.
Okay. So I just want to qualify that so that I can explain to you that.
Okay.
And in a nutshell, it's pitted between two ethnic groups and the family. Actually, it's one family ethnic group, the Borans and the Gabras. They're stuck with the Rendile now, a part of this conflict system, and it is the uniqueness about this conflict, unlike places like Kerio Valley or Baragoi, where it is decades in the making. This is something that's very recent, but it is, I think, the worst conflict we're facing in the country. Why? Because the main problem, and which is, I can say, the undercurrent, the core, the root issue, is what I call existential ethno-politicization. Okay?
Existential ethno-politicization. Okay.
Okay? Right. And the reason we coin that term is complex to get a complex and a comprehensive way of describing how they hate one another. Okay? How they see each other as an existential threat. So I will do everything it takes either to wipe you out or defend myself. Okay? which leads to a zero-sum game to resource sharing and power sharing. So that I want power at all costs to finish you, to defend my community and to finish you. Okay?
Yeah.
Which leads to many other things. That's essentially the undercurrent. Of course, the issue will land. They'll talk about the boundaries they have. And you think, traditionally speaking, this northern Kenya, you think, well, and what newspapers report and what media reports say you guys is cattle rustling.
Yep.
It's not really about that. You hear it's X number of livestock was stolen, camels or goats or cows. That is just triggers, and it's very surface. The real issues is very deep. And now, of course, given the political angle, let's say politicization, it accelerates this. Is a catalyst to what we are saying right now in Marsabit.
Look, the land must be referred to as Marsabit,
Yes.
okay? They have Borana.
Yes.
They are the largest community,
Yes, slightly.
okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Then you have Gabra.
Gabra.
And then you have Rendile.
Mm-hmm.
But the Rendile are more than the Gabra.
No, they're not.
And then you have Burji, who are the least. So tell me, what's the population of Gabra?
The last census we checked, I'll give a percentage. I think they were about 28 to 28%, I think, of population of Marsabit.
Rendile?
Then Dile were much fewer. They're about 11, I'll say 15% approximately. If I
And
check.
Burji?
5%. I mean, they're few, even 2%. They're the least.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Burjis are the least. And they're not, I mean, they're not really involved in this conflict. I mean, they once, I think a few years back, a few of them were attacked, their farms, but they're really not part of this conflict as we see right now. They're neutral actors, and their focus is business. They're not really involved in this conflict much.
You know, I'm going into these numbers.
Yes.
These aren't communities that started living next to each other last year or the year before that.
Very true.
They've been living next to each other for the longest time.
Yes.
They've intermarried.
Yes.
They've even had cohesion.
Very
The
true.
problems that they've had are the problems that neighbors tend to have with each other.
Very true.
Nothing unusual.
Very true.
And if you go to any part of this country, you will find that at some point in their history, communities had issues with the others, but which with the time were resolved.
Very true.
Where am I going with this? I'm asking the question, are these problems, are they things that have organically come about as a result of whether it is resources, or is it political, or is it something that is instigated?
It's both. I said it's complex. It's what you just said. What you've listed is actually both. It's actually
both.
both. It's a combination of all that mix, because in reality, your child or grandchild today born doesn't know to hate anybody.
No.
You understand? Okay, that is taught. I was in Joro last time when they were killing each other, the Ogieks and the Kipsigis. It was bad, and I told them, if you take a Kipsigis child right now and take them to Kiambu, okay, and they're grown up in Kiambu, and they're told, Kipsigis are bad people, they're evil people, hate them. No, he or she is Kipsigis.
Yep.
But when they're 18, they will learn to grow and hate who?
The Kipsigis.
But what is their blood? The Kipsigis.
Yes.
You understand? What I'm saying is, partly it is taught and instigated by people who are on an agenda. You know what is funny? Not only are they just neighbors, the level of intermarry is unbelievable. I mean, they are one family. First of all, Boronas and Gabras are basically one family. They speak the same language.
They do.
Nobody can tell the difference. They can't tell the difference between one another. Actually, they really can until they say, I'm Borana or Gabra, because they look exactly the same. They talk exactly the same language. You understand? As a matter of fact, a generation ago, they had this, even till today, they have the same clans. So the same clan, you all called in the same clan across both communities. So, of course, they intermarried. So this, as I say, this is something that just came up the other day. Why? Because when I say existential, ethnopolization is an issue of supremacy. One group wants to feel superior and supreme to the other. They said, you know what? It's an issue about ethnic identity. We don't want to be part of this. We want to be part of this. We want to be ourselves. And therefore, the other community is the enemy. And those seeds were planted. Not more than 30 years ago, actually, as a matter of fact, 20-something years ago. But now we are bearing those fruits I mean, there's nobody who hates each other in this country. Believe me, we are in every conflict system in this country as Gabras.
It doesn't
and
run as
brothers.
deep as this.
No, nothing close.
And you're saying
Nothing
this is
close.
something that's just about
Just the
what?
other day.
This century.
No, not this century. Less than 30 years ago. Actually, 20-something years ago.
So the question that then I would ask is,
I said it's something-
I have to go back and ask, who are the leaders who fanned
So who
this?
started it?
Yes,
Right.
because the people who clearly fanned it. Why do I ask this? Okay,
Yeah.
our minister for finance
Yeah.
is a Gabra,
Correct.
all right?
Yes.
The current governor is a Borona,
Yep.
right? Now, for you to be elected governor, surely it can't be just a Gabra who voted for you. There's some Boranas who must have voted for you.
Yes.
For you to have that overwhelming.
Rendile,
Exactly.
and-
Exactly.
Yes.
So now that you have a situation where we are coming to the end of a term, because this is where my problem comes in. There's been relative peace. But now that we have an imminent election, suddenly issues
Issues
are
that-
flaring up.
True.
So, the political angle that I was speaking of, I would not have difficulties pointing fingers.
You can go back 20 years and start pointing fingers.
I can point fingers now,
Now.
because if I know how our politicians function, and this is now where my age has given me an advantage, and I look at some of the so-called tribal clashes that we had. How do you have a situation where you have a tribal clash and it only seems to be in the Rift
Right,
Valley,
yes.
and it only where there's a large number of Kikuyus who live there? How is it possible? But the question that you mentioned about the Ogieks and the Kipsigis, you see, now that tells you how these things can grow.
Yes.
Because the Kisis who live in Nyamira during those so-called tribal clashes also had issues with their neighbors. But I find it strange because these are people who had lived next to each other for
For
the
the
longest
longest
time.
time.
Why do they suddenly have an issue? And then you come to Mombasa with the Kayabombo issue. You find that an entire community of Luos who had lived in that area for the longest time.
Born and raised.
Yes,
It's suddenly become an issue.
it's suddenly an issue. And Onyango Hamisi is suddenly having to move to Luoland, a place he has never been to in his
Doesn't even
entire
know.
life.
Yes.
Yes. So, you look at it, one may talk about this issue. Let's move it even to 2008. And people say it just packed off. No such thing, in my view.
It wasn't spontaneous.
There's nothing spontaneous about it.
No.
Absolutely nothing. Now, you are the expert. Tell me, am I fishing in a dry well?
No, you're not.
Yes.
No, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, when was it? I think Thursday.
Yes.
All the leaders of Marsabit, political leaders, were summoned to the State House.
Good.
Okay. And the president, it was a no holds barred
Meeting.
conversation. And he did not mince his words. He was very clear. He said, "You guys are the problem. You guys have failed." Of course, he knows. He has all the he has the brief. He hit it right, and he gave them 5 days. 5 days to end this thing, because he knows. He told me, "You guys, all of you,
He's got the intelligence. He knows what he's talking
you
about.
are the problem."
Now, and that's
Yes.
where I have a problem.
Yes.
You see, and you've called it ethno-politicization.
Yes.
That means it is politicians taking
Yes.
advantage of the ethnic differences
Absolutely.
between people
Yes.
to fund it and for their own benefit.
Yes.
Yep.
And the people who are in charge of government are also politicians. And so what do? They just give
slap on the wrist.
on the wrist. You know, when Bonaya Godana and Miruge Kariuki died on that flight to go and seek peace in the area, it was because of flare-ups.
Yeah.
When leaders before that had gone and met, flare-ups. When leaders after that have gone and met, flare-ups. When these particular leaders are being summoned to State House and being told squarely, we know it's you and it's you, flare-ups. When in the previous elections, leaders are summoned to DCI, Kiambu Road, come, we know them when we're going to rain on the flare-ups, and it's clearly known. Why can't we just deal with individuals? Clearly, this is an individual problem, not a community problem. Why is it so difficult for us to deal with criminal elements in our society?
Because we
Why?
have warlords masquerading as politicians.
Yes. Why
That's
can't we
essentially
just
what
deal
they
with
are.
them as the law prescribes? What's so difficult?
Well, I'll tell you what. And not saying much of this, but I can tell you on given the stakes that are right now happening in Marsabit, and given our analysis even to the higher ups in terms of the stakes that are in Marsabit, I can tell you now, I think by next week it'll be very different. Individuals will be held accountable. I can tell you that. Yeah,
Accountable to what extent?
To the
Accountable
full
to the
extent.
extent of
Yes.
being charged in court,
to the full
being
extent.
charged with the causing
To the full extent, because
destruction and
because
death
at
and
what
displacement
point
of
we
people.
cannot allow individuals to hold an entire county and an entire population hostage. It's not going to happen. And to your point, yes, for a long time, when certain individuals participate in such things, I mean, people look the other way, and it's endemic not just in this place; it's across the board, especially in northern Kenya. I mean, it's all going up. If you draw your line and go up towards,
Yep.
it's really these communities. For the longest time, the words that you've used, for you to be a politician, I mean, you given the dynamics of these communities and the culture of these communities, you have to look like you are their warrior and fight for them, and all that. So I think for now, we will not allow, and that's why we've allowed dialogue. Giving the dialogue a chance and bring these guys to listen, guys, strike this deal. It's for your own good and for the good of the community. But one of the issues in Marsabit, I've been there like a gazillion times, spoken to a gazillion people. One of the things that is very consistent is you hear what people are saying in Marsabit is what I call, or what they call, just the laxity of government, laxity and inaction. Okay,
They feel the government has abandoned them.
they abandon them. And that is why there's that impunity, because they're like, listen, we'll take the law to our hands because nothing happens. Let me ask you something. Where in this country can 300 people die in a year or so and nothing, not even a single prosecution or conviction?
Yeah.
Not even one.
Not even arrests.
Since December, since when the peace process started, I mean, on average, we are seeing 2-3 people dying every single day. I mean, not one person is shot, it's headline news.
Yeah.
Okay? Headline news. It will be talked on TV, radio, here, everywhere. I mean, every single day.
And yet we have security forces in those same areas.
Of course.
And yet we have a commission established under the Constitution to deal with such issues,
Where we've been at it.
to deal with such people
Yes.
and make sure there are prosecutions. And that's what I want us to head to after we take this break. What have you guys been doing? You've been in existence for so long. We pay you, we maintain you to make sure that such things don't happen, that those people are brought to book. And just like you've said, 300 people have died in a year, not a single prosecution.
And with that
300
question,
people have died in a year, not a single conviction. 300 people have died in a year, not a single public shaming of the persons responsible for it. And yet, we have a National Cohesion and Integration Commission.
and we are also aware that many of these things happened long before you became a commissioner. But since
We are
it
talking
is-
about the institution,
But since it is you who is here,
not
It's
Dr.
called the
Makori.
continuance of governance.
Yes.
Continuance of government.
Yes.
The NCIC and what you've been doing. Kenya's biggest conversation continues. In the room with you is Eric Latif, CT Muga. Our guest this hour is Dr. Danvas Makori, a commissioner with the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. We're talking about conflict in Marsabit County, what needs to happen to end that conflict. People are dying on a daily basis because of what Dr. Makori has described as existential ethnopoliticization. Now, Dr. Makori, there's some shout out for you here. Dorcas Kimodo, who is a very good listener in Malindi, says, wow, very good command of the English language, Dr. Harry. Shout out to you from
Thank
Dorcas.
you. Marsabit.
Now, we were talking about this just before we went to the break. You can look back and say, in the last 30 years, this is when this conflict has started. And mainly it's between the Borana and the Gabra in that area. The Rendiles and the Buji to a very, very lesser extent. And you can also pinpoint and say this is mostly politically instigated, and it started that time because of politics. It has continued because of politics. Recently, there have been a lot of talk. You've been there a gazillion times, to quote your own words. You have met with the people on the ground. You've spoken to community leaders. You've spoken to ordinary people in the community. You have spoken to opinion leaders and political leaders. And we still haven't seen movement. Even if we see movement, it's just going to be some pacification and a possibility of a flare-up at a future date. My question, since the establishment of NCIC, first as an Agenda 4 Commission, and now as a proper shielded constitutional commission, why haven't we seen an end to this? Why haven't we seen prosecution because of the conflict in Marsabit County?
I think now that you've mentioned Agenda 4, first of all, we're still an Agenda 4 commission, and we based on the SAC Act, and our main work, our real work and core work, Latif, is to bring cohesion, is to bring people. We're peace builders. We make peace. You understand? When people incite in terms of what you say, we investigate, and our role and investigation, because now, apart the same constitution you've quoted, the DPP is the one who does the prosecution.
Yep.
The judiciary that does the listening and the judgment of the case. So our main work is peace building as a core. And also we look at one of the reasons of where we got to 2008. The underlying reason is just because of resource allocation. It was skewed to an extent. So people felt like, you know what, for a long time, one community felt suddenly like, screw this, we'll ban the country. So what happened was, excuse my language, did I say that in radio? What I'm just saying the sentiment, what they felt.
Yeah.
So what the issue was like, listen, resources has to be distributed equally, equity rather, that's a precise word, equity distribution, and that's what we are in charge in terms of our mandate, equity distribution of resource, whether it's jobs, whether it's natural resource, whether it's government resource in terms of money allocation and so on and so forth. Okay.
Like
yes.
Like
Hold on. I want to get to what we've done. I know. I want to give that answer.
Okay.
I want to give that answer to
Carry
it.
on.
What? See, yes, there are conflict systems that have persistent and, quite frankly, should have been dealt with a long time ago. Now, when we came to as commissions just a year and a half ago, one of the things we decided, and we focus, and as a strategy, it's very clear strategy, is that whenever we take up a conflict, okay, whenever we take up something, we will see to the end. It's not about PR, it's not about anything else, it's really about working behind the scenes. It's really hard work. We've been on this issue, Marsabit, for a whole year, I can tell you. Narok, we've pacified to an extent. So there are certain places we've really pacified. There's a peace pact between the Marakwet and the Pokots. Although the last weekend somebody decided to be smart about it. Okay, so for this one, I can tell you, conflicts are something that's been there for 30 years. I don't think, realistically speaking, I was given 6 months to do it. I don't think it's going to be possible, but we'll still do it. And I'm persuaded. So it's a process.
So you haven't answered the question, but look, let's just hear.
No. I want him to continue trying to answer the question, because if you look at Tana River, conflicts also used to flare up.
Yep.
And those ones were predominantly natural resources. And why do I say this? You'll find, for instance, the Orma or the Wardei, who are pastoralists,
Yes.
and the Pokomo, who are predominantly farmers.
Farmers.
Now, they would grow their maize next to the river.
Yeah.
Okay? Makes it easiest. Now, when these guys bring their cattle,
The commons, yes.
and by the these cows are many.
Yeah.
In the thousands.
Oh, there are many.
In the thousands.
Can you imagine what happens when they walk through that maize plantation? They're going to eat the maize.
Clear,
right.
Maize is sweeter.
Yep.
Okay. Now, one understood what brought about those conflicts. One doesn't hear of that conflict very often in Tana River anymore. I said one doesn't hear. I'm not saying it's not there.
It's there, yeah.
Yes, but one doesn't hear it.
Yes.
It doesn't flare up. Now, is it because anything that happens in those far-flung areas are not given coverage? Nobody cares about them, meaning they can kill themselves until they all die? Or is it that the commission that you represent have actually found a formula that can actually work in areas that have conflict, so that you actually avert the conflict, not resolve it, avert it, so that it actually doesn't happen?
Partly, I think it's a mixture of both, because once in a while it flares up, and flare up is somebody's cattle is going to stray up in somebody's farm, like you said. We still get those reports, but we put infrastructures, peace committees between these communities. So these infrastructures are placed in these hotspots areas across the country, not just the river, up to Kerio Valley, and for the most part they work to an extent. And rightly we say, if you look at the hotspots as far as conflict is concerned, it's always for the longest time. Let me rephrase that. For the longest time, it has revolved around resource sharing, especially in pastoral communities. And in places where we've put mechanisms, we have peace agreements, especially in Mandera. It was those the clans, the Marules and the Godias. We have those peace agreements, and we have mechanisms to monitor them. I mean, actually, it's holding peace. That's what I'm saying. There's many places I can tell you. Mandera, we've specified Wajir is holding to an extent. Elgeyo Marakwet, Pokot, West Pokot. West Pokot is I mean, that place was horrible. And for the most part, we've been able to do a lot of these things. Narok, Nakuru border between the Kipsigis and the Masais, now the Kipsigis and the Kikuyus to an extent, and the Ogieks. Well, I mean, we pretty much have been able to find ways and mechanisms for people to live in. Now, is it perfect? No. Human beings will always, to an extent, especially, I think this part of the world will always conflict. So there are places where I can tell you that. Now we are seeing these. Now we are focused on this, and that's why we put everything on the table. There's nothing. We've put everything we have to make sure this conflict in Marsabit resolved.
But Dr. So long as individuals who are behind this, where I was going with what I was saying was there's always conflict, even within communities that are cohesive, have the same language. There are conflicts within families.
Yes.
That isn't the issue. It's the flaring up where people start dying, where people need not die.
Very true.
And it is clear that there are people who are fanning it. There are people who are behind it, and they're the ones who are trying to, for whatever reason.
And funding it too.
Yeah, and funding it too. Because in all honesty, if you look at the so-called hotspots that you're speaking about, all right? There will be periods in the history of those communities where they've actually known how to live among each other.
Very true.
They even know the peculiarities that each community has.
Very true.
And then someone comes along
And decides
to fan it. You talked about complaints in 2008 about disparities. Huh?
yes.
Let me present you with a scenario. If you look at the chronism that we have in Kenya and the way we go about our business, okay? 1968-69, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga stops being a vice president of Kenya, right?
Yep.
The Luo community, I come from that community. The thing that we said was we were marginalized
Yes.
as a result of that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Fast forward it. President Jomo Kenyatta ceases to be president. All right? His community, the Kikuyu, we are being marginalized by the Moi government because Moi doesn't want us.
True.
President Moi comes in, he stops being president. There is the same sentiment expressed by members of his community. We are being marginalized. Now, is it marginalization, or is it that you stopped enjoying the privileges that you had when your man was in a position of power? Which is it? Or is it a combination of both? There's a reason why I asked the
Did
question.
you abuse the opportunity that you had to the disadvantage of others?
Usually they did. And they will say they didn't. And the thing that I find really peculiar about this is there are very few people who now represent the whole community. Because in each of these communities, if you ask, they'll say, but my life didn't really change even when so-and-so was in power.
Yes. Actually, it even became worse, probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
But because the representation is that your person is at the helm. Now, you trickle it down to the county level, which we now have, okay? And you will have a similar problem. Now, what I'm saying is, until and unless you address the real issues, just because someone says they're marginalized doesn't mean they're necessarily marginalized. It probably just means that the privilege you had has been removed. Now, there are people who are clearly picked on, clearly marginalized. They were detained, they were jailed. Some even lost property. Those are clear cases. There's no arguing about it. But for many people who later claim that they were marginalized, I am of the view that if you look at later issues, it was just a question of privilege has been removed. Now, you tell me, if somebody wants to maintain privilege, won't they do everything within their means, including funding? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Now, that is my argument. That the conflicts we're seeing right now, this resource distribution and the issues about them have existed from antiquity. It didn't start yesterday or in this century. It is the clinging on to power and wanting to hold on to it at whatever cost. And in this case, it's at the cost of human lives. And that is why the question I'm asking is, why aren't you people bringing these people to book? Because you know who they are. If a layman like me can point a finger.
It's about impunity as well. Just word on to that question. just like you said, if you've seen successive governments have not done anything to the people who perpetrated the killing of your people, what are you going to do? Are you going to rely on that government that has done nothing, or are you going to take up arms and defend yourself? And it continues the vicious cycle. And that way you propagate impunity.
And you move from being a political leader to being a warlord. And if you're a warlord, it means that you have, it's like you're claiming that you have an independent state within a state. Treasonous,
Actually,
if you ask me.
actually, what we've seen in Marsabit is the rise of militia on both sides. Okay, on both sides. This is just one side. In a sovereign state,
With a government.
with
in
the
place.
government,
Yeah.
you have people have their own militias, well trained, well armed, well equipped, well supplied.
Yep.
Okay, but
With a very, very, very robust intelligence service.
of course, I mean, there's nothing that you do that they don't know, even your breathing. Now, what are we doing? Now, just to answer your question, as we engaged in this process throughout, when the peace process started, one of the first things we brought into the place was not just a ceasefire, but demobilization, disbandment, and disarmament of these militias voluntarily. Okay, and they agreed to an extent. For a week, the movement started to demobilize these ones. Of course, some of these people you said were not very happy. Okay, and you know what is funny? Every time we have a very serious movement in terms of peace in Marsabit, we are very, very, very serious peace process. Both principals, who you've mentioned, appointed people to negotiate on behalf of the communities. Okay, because they don't have time. They said, we'll appoint 7 people. Okay, so both the governor and the CS appointed 7 people to negotiate a permanent solution to the issue. Within a month and a half, that was torpedoed.
By?
Of course, people who
A
are
third
not
party or
no, the people who are not very happy with our process.
right?
Okay. Now, one of the things that we had agreed, and that's why I think we had protected that button, was a demobilization of those militias. Now, as I'm telling you right now, and I can tell you because we've given dialogue a chance. Okay, and even right now they'll be given a chance by themselves to demobilize, to voluntarily disarm those militias. This is going to happen most likely not. So what's going to happen is what? It will allow the government to do actually its job, which is supposed to be done a long time ago, is basically to do a disarmament that sometimes people will suffer. I can tell you it's not going to be easy, but at one point we just can't allow the country to go that way. So those are the actions I'm telling you which will be taken, because we've given dialogue a chance, and now you give your colleagues within this sector apparatus to do their job, because those arms, those militias have to, because if you remove the sting from a bee, then you don't have to worry about a bee.
Then the
You
bee
understand?
dies.
So that's the sting we have to
fly.
remove.
The bee becomes a fly.
It just become a fly. So we need them to become they need to fly in peace and stop stinging one another. So that sting has to be removed from both sides.
But
Both elements removed.
I'm still on
Yes.
the case of NCIC.
Yes.
All right. So you told us, yes, one of your core mandates is peace building. Do you have a mandate to investigate
Yes.
and to hold accountable?
Yes.
You have the capacity.
Do you have the capacity to do this? Have you actually rolled out? Is it part of your strategy that as this is happening, as the government security apparatus rolls in and does this, you as NCIC, with a mandate to investigate, can actually present a file to the DPP and say, these are the individuals that are ultimately responsible for what has happened in this area?
Do you have the capacity? Not 100%.
Okay, what
To be very to be
10, 20, 30, 40?
to be frank with you.
All right. Do you have
Yeah.
security personnel, police service personnel who are attached to the
Yes.
commission?
Yes, we have DCI officers attached to the commission, Secretary Commission.
Yes.
Yes.
So you're able to investigate.
Yes.
Are you investigating?
We're investigating, and the files, I can tell you, most of the files are with the DPP. I can tell you that.
How many, in the last years of NCIC's existence, how many times has NCIC forwarded files to the DPP with regards to Marsabit?
To Marsabit, I think twice.
Twice?
Yes.
And what was the response from the DPP?
Here's a file, add X, Y, and Z.
Insufficient data, insufficient evidence
Yeah.
to prosecute.
Yeah.
Then once it's taken back to NCIC, does the NCIC go ahead and look for the insufficient
Well, actually,
information?
we've been yes, we have to. Once that file is open and you're given a feedback, you need to bolster your evidence. You need to add X, Y, and Z to this process or this file. Then we do that.
And once you do that, you take it back to the
Yes,
DPP?
yes.
Well, you can see
Yes.
where I'm heading.
Yeah, I know you're heading. Yes.
I'm heading to the point
Yes.
where has the NCIC actually taken concrete evidence and a file to the DPP where we can then say it's the DPP who has not done his job? Because I'm still stuck on NCIC. As far as I'm concerned, because I haven't had any of those things, NCIC is not doing its job.
I think if you're forgetting, let me give you our mandate as far as investigation is concerned. It's very narrow. Okay. Our mandate in investigation is very narrow. It is in regards to incitement or and hate speech.
Okay.
You understand? So it's what you have said. You are sponsoring these elements, you funding the elements. That is the elements of the DCI and so on and so forth.
So that one is not
the
in the
NIS and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Our mandate is very clear. It is incitement of hate speech. So or whether it's on social media or so on and so forth, whatever, it's what you say that causes violence, that spurs violence. Now, as far as the criminal element, that is beyond us. That is not our mandate. Criminal element is the DCI and other mandated bodies. You understand? So as far as incitement, that is where it starts and ends, that we have. So it's our mandate is very under. So even in this Marsabit complex issue, these leaders never incite in public. They don't go to rallies and say, "Oh, kill these guys." Once in a while, we have a case where one local MCAs did, and actually the guy has gone completely underground missing. Is a fugitive because actually, as I can tell you, that's one of the files that we have.
All right.
Okay. Well, the files we have that somebody actually incited, and in public, and we are searching. The evidence was there, and he's a fugitive till today.
Okay.
So essentially, Daktari,
Yes.
do I understand you be saying that you're actually toothless?
No. How is that toothless? How is that toothless? When people say that, how is that toothless? Let me ask you.
No, I want you to explain to me how you have teeth.
Let me answer.
Yes.
Let me
How is
answer
that-
how toothless then that would be. Because we have seen in many cases when cases of hate speech and incitement are taken to court, and in defense, those alleged perpetrators come back and say it's a matter of translation.
They
And
say
in
that.
many cases,
yes.
we've seen even the courts agreeing and saying, what you've presented to us, for example, the evidence that you're adducing before court, it's a recording, it could have been doctored.
No, it is.
It's a video, it could have been doctored.
I agree with you.
So basically, you
I
have been
agree.
given a tool, but that tool is
I agree with you.
Insufficient.
There's an article
it's a
by
tooth for a bee.
there's an article by I think a good columnist is a lawyer called Danvas which really essentially say that, because if you look at our act, it's quite vague to an extent how it defines hate speech.
Yeah.
You understand? And it's true that I agree. You understand? So it's a matter of the law not being precise. Now we are amending the law as we speak so that it can be very precise. It's what you said, because the Constitution ends in terms of free speech. It says you're free to say whatever you want to say. As long as you don't incite to war and propaganda to war and so on and so forth. Okay, understand? Now it comes to our act, is very vague. So I agree with you. So the act in itself doesn't give us that mechanism to do that, and that's why we are amending the act. Now, that issue
You're a
of
big
toothless.
bulldog with one tooth.
No. Ours
This
is not
a-
to bite,
no,
guys.
this is a vegetable eating tooth
No,
bulldog.
no, guys. No. Listen, no. But see, what did you say? Our core mandate is peace building. It has not to bite people. It has not to bite. Is it for us? It's really
It's
not.
to seek cohesion and
It's
integration.
cohesion, integration, and peace.
Okay, that's
to
what I agree
Pendane.
with you. But
To
now,
Pendane.
look at the problem of Marsabit yet again.
Yes.
We talked about natural resources.
Yes.
Part of the problem with this, the water holes that we talk about, do you know what
And the
happened?
pans. Yes.
During the Moi era, boundaries were changed.
And that is one of the reasons we have a conflict right now.
So these key watering holes
Yes.
ended up in North Hor. Yes, when the boundaries were changed, it just
It
carved
moved from where to North Hor?
Yes, it moved that way.
In 1988, North Hor going up, including now Saku, was considered Marsabit North. Okay. Some fella decided to carve themselves
A small
a
constituency.
small Jesse,
Right.
okay, called Saku.
Yep.
Looking back, if that wasn't done, or if it was done a better way, if it was done, let's
In a
look at
more
both ways. If
inclusive-
it was done in a more
public
comprehensive,
communication.
smart way, or not done, we'll not have this conflict as we speak right now. I can
Yes,
tell you.
but
one of the
it
genesis.
goes further, as I mentioned to you
Yes.
in passing, all right? You have the Borana, the dominant community. North Hor, borders Ethiopia.
Yes.
Who are on the other side? Oromo. Okay? So they are sandwiched. And the Oromo in Ethiopia are 35 million strong. They are Boranas. There's no they are Boranas. So in a sense, one can see the situation the governors find themselves in.
They feel
Oh, yes.
sieged.
One could argue they're under siege. Now, when you have a situation such as this one, the peace making process that you talk about make perfect sense to me. However, I don't see the process going forth. I don't see it producing any fruit whatsoever, so long as the warlords are not dealt with, because they are known.
Now, here's the question. I also got to pose to you.
Right.
Did this conflict
Start with
precede or start with them?
Start with the current warlords.
Yes, as you call them.
Oh, no. If I get
You
malaria
see?
today, am I
You
going
see?
to be discussing the malaria I had when I was a child?
No.
Get all
I agree.
warlords.
No, you have a point, but I'm saying this conflict has preceded these guys, the principals.
So it got into a point where
Yes.
it's now owned by more people, not just the one
It's a
warlord.
whole community.
It's not the current warlord. So basically, there's that fear of destabilizing the community. If you remove this one guy, there are very many more people who support him.
Eric, they are more dominant. In every community, there are voices that are more dominant than
of
others.
course.
And we all know this.
Of course.
They are the opinion shapers, they are the opinion holders. We know this. And let me repeat, they are
known.
They need to be dealt with.
You and your commission know
No.
them.
DCI, intelligence,
They know them. And so long as they're not dealt with, we are going to be having a discussion when people are dying.
Don't you believe? Let me ask you a question. Should the owners of war be the owners of peace?
No, they should be made to be the owners of peace.
But that's what we're doing. But that's our job.
That's part of it.
Is to bring this to the table and say, let's talk peace. Because you will not, as you said, how is dealing with them is two front. You can say legal mechanism, arrest, and so on and so forth. That's when dealing with them is use, come to the table and say that you need to stop it, find peace solution for your community. So for us, where we come from is I'm a peacemaker.
Yeah.
By and large. So I bring these two people together and say, guys, let's have peace.
That conversation,
if that fails, then we
It
have
can't-
other mechanisms.
it-
And you know what?
Chari, that
It can't be
conversation
in
will be much
isolation.
better and much easier when some of their leaders are resting in
can't be in
jail.
isolation, yes.
Believe me, that conversation about peace will
Yugoslavia, there are people who are being held accountable
we arrested the two
today.
MPs a while back, and there was a peace for next. Remember the time we arrested the MP for Sakwe, the MP for
And then what happened?
for North Hall.
for how long?
Then what
They
happened?
arrested. They went to the cell.
then
They
what
stayed there for a while. Then they actually talked peace, and they went back to the community. Both of them said, let's stop this. They were arrested.
Slobodan
We've arrested them.
Milosevic.
We
right?
have.
Yes.
Slobodan Milosevic was sought after because of what there was happening in former Yugoslavia.
True.
Right?
Not after, long after.
Long after.
True.
You have got to hold people accountable for their actions, for there to be peace. I think both those have to go hand in hand. But that's my opinion. You are the expert.
So the question is, if you remove this principle, who you have to
Will
negotiate,
there
who
be
will
peace?
negotiate on behalf of his community, who negotiates then?
Somebody else.
Somebody else.
There's always somebody else. Before him, there was somebody else. After him, there'll be somebody
A
else.
leader will emerge. We're
Jail
coming to the end of the show.
and make sure they stay in jail.
Jail.
Yes.
We are coming to the end of the show. Danvas Makori, Commissioner, NCIC. Thank you for joining us, and for I think you've shed a lot of light on what's exactly been happening in that region. But we hope that there will be peace and long-lasting peace, not just some fragile peace in the area. City, today's proverb.
No barber shaves himself.
Miskia, you've got to shave that guy.
Clean.
Shave
Actually,
the barber.
the word you used is no barber shave themselves, because other people try to shave themselves. You like took a mirror, you start looking at
And with what consequences?
Thank you for
Very
tuning in
dire
today. Have a lovely day. Eid Mubarak. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock.